Story 1. When the Supreme Court ruled that Trump had immunity from any and all crimes, past, present, and future.
When I was taking civics, local, state, and national government, or LSN as we called it, in high school, I learned that the Supreme Court of the United States has lifetime appointments. And I said, what the fuck is that about? What a dumb idea. Sucks to be sitting here 20 years later and realizing my teenage self foresaw what the founders of our country couldn't.
They stole a Supreme Court seat because they said a Supreme Court justice shouldn't be seated in an election year. They all went along with it, even though the presidency went to the person with the least votes by millions. And then they immediately turned around and rammed through another justice in an election year. The Supreme Court will be a 6-3 conservative supermajority for the rest of my life, even though there are fewer registered Republicans in the country than Democrats. 3 of the justices on the Supreme Court were appointed by a Republican who got fewer votes than the Democratic candidate.
Yeah, I remember having that conversation with my now Trumper friend. What prevents the president from doing whatever he wants using executive action? Checks and balances. The Supreme Court wouldn't let that happen. But what if he pays them off or they play ball with him? That would never happen. They are lifelong judges chosen from respectable people with long histories of bipartisan cases. Yeah, what a load.
Story 2. When the Epstein files existed, then they were a hoax, then they were on Bondi's desk, then they weren't real again, then they found the files, investigated, and found no wrongdoing by themselves. Story 3. Trump got reelected. As big a mess as he made the first time around, people still voted for the bastard a second and third time. The damage is deeper than just the things he's doing to the country. The real damage is in the people who think electing Trump was a good idea.
When I read or hear presidential speeches, public addresses, or correspondence from even a few decades ago, it makes me feel sick to think of the kinds of presidential communication we get now. It's horrific, and I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that. It's a sign of an absolutely fucking cataclysmic drop-off in the average person's capacity for nuance and abstraction. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together. Can you fucking imagine if we had a president who could speak to us like this again?
Trump isn't the problem. He never really was. It's the 1/3 to 1/2 of the citizenry that thinks this shit is okay. That is appalling and disheartening. We obviously have to purge the criminals within our power structure first, but I don't even know where to begin with the religious indoctrination that convinced so many otherwise fairly intelligent people that bigotry, a distortion of patriarchal values, is somehow patriotic.
But he said he didn't know about it. They're saying on the news that you're trying to lie to me, that there's a chance he knows about it. Why won't you liberals just be honest?
Story 4. I remember it very distinctly. October 2024. Obviously, we had already been through lots of bad shit. January 6th, COVID, impeachments. I felt, for some reason, like they were still moments that were aberrations from the norm. Listening to Ambassador Sondland, who had testified against Trump, come out ahead of the election and suck Trump's dick like he was afraid of a public beheading for disobedience to a dictator. That was the moment that I knew we were fucked. Listen to this sniveling piece of shit coward.
Listening to Ambassador Sondland, who had testified against Trump, come out ahead of the election and suck Trump's dick like he was afraid of a public beheading for disobedience to a dictator. That was the moment that I knew we were fucked. And tons of so-called leftist Redditors get upvoted into the stratosphere for saying, well, you can't really blame him. He's afraid for himself and his family. It's the smart thing to do. Same as they fucking always do when anyone does this.
Story 5. Hans Blix was given permission to inspect Saddam Hussein's weapons, but then the United States invaded anyway. I was in high school and that sent a chill down my spine. I've seen the same attitude from belligerent people who just wanted to fight someone. They came up with an excuse, and no matter what, they were fishing for a fight. It marked the moment that the United States I once knew was firmly gone.
I felt this way when they called the election for George W. Bush. I was a senior in high school, and it was clear to me, well, two things were clear. First, Clinton did a pretty good job, and I didn't understand why people would want to vote Republican at that point. Second, Bush was maybe the dumbest person I remembered running for president in my life, and I couldn't believe people were voting for that guy. When he spoke, the only thing I could think was, this guy isn't smart. Even guys with no shot, like Pat Buchanan, were smarter than Bush. I used to listen to Howard Stern when driving into school in the morning. He was still on FM radio at the time. And I remember him saying, this guy Bush has been handed everything from oil companies to baseball teams, and apparently he's run them all into the ground. So when Bush became president, it was the first time in my life that I thought, wow, the country is screwed.
Honestly, as a member of Generation Z, I've never been proud to be an American, yeah. Why would I be proud to be in the only nation with a concept of paying for necessities? With a concept of paying for healthcare? With a concept of we need to fight every single country's wars for them. But you also aren't allowed to tell anyone that. Like, there's nothing good about this place other than the food and maybe the drugs. But even Europe still has real heroin, so even the drugs aren't good here, haha.
Man, that was such a moment for me. I was in journalism school and told my teachers, UN, veto or not, they're going. They told me I shouldn't indulge in political fiction. To my dismay, I was vindicated 2 months later, and I realized the GOP had just killed the UN.
Story 6. The recent reaction to immigration and customs enforcement killing civilians. Both times, the administration jumped to defend them by claiming they were terrorists, despite this plainly not being true. The body cam footage of the killer of MS. Good showed him muttering "fucking bitch" after killing her, and he clearly showed zero remorse. Multiple camera angles proved the administration's account was pure fiction. Similarly, with Mr. Preddy, multiple camera angles revealed the reality, and they brazenly lied about it to the world. In both cases, there's been no consequences. We have mountains of evidence, but apparently the state can murder you in cold blood, lie about it, and that's fine. It's all fine. Go about your day, everything is fine. The state can murder you, and that's fine.
I think this is what's troubling the world so much. The United States may have been an icon of a well-run democracy. It never stopped telling people it was. Today, clearly, the trends you see in developing nations, such as the police being a kind of mafia that can harass and kill with impunity, these are becoming firmly established in United States culture. If Americans don't fight back, then obviously it will keep getting worse. The intimidation of immigration and customs enforcement protesters will become intimidation of voters. Fascist norms will become American culture. So the question is, do you want to fight back now, or in a year, or 2 years? Or just never? There's this sleepwalking that the world sees amongst Americans, barely getting up to vote. The tiniest of protests, almost as if Americans are trying not to upset the government. If 75 million people take 90 days off work, there will be some costs, and the people will force the government to change policies. And the next thing 100% of Americans think is, that's unrealistic, which is another way of saying, the American Revolution was bullshit. The American Declaration of Independence was bullshit. American claims of exceptionalism aren't inferior people protesting too much. Democracy is too hard for Americans. It's not in their nature. There's nothing terribly redeeming about Americans. We always knew Trump was evil and terrible. And I agree, 2016 was kind of free pass. But the message that Americans are sending the world today is, we're not the people you thought we were. We will let our country die and just give the appearance of protesting on days that are convenient for our schedule. Protests like Osama bin Laden is wearing a Trump mask. Like you can see Republic 2.0 on the horizon. Your parents and grandparents got the world into this. I don't think your generation is about anything other than this moment.
Yep, honestly, these kinds of lies help them win power again and again. When he was running his campaign, Trump went in front of a mom's group and told them that our country was in an extremely dangerous place because schools themselves were selecting kids out from class randomly and performing transgender surgery on them. He explained to the concerned moms group that this was not just happening against the will of the parents, but the will of the students themselves. He literally told them that you send your child into school, lunchbox in hand, and you get them back a few days later after having been subjected to brutal surgical procedures. This was apparently one of the major things that had gone wrong with our country and thus needed to be fixed. After it was all said and done, the worst part was that no one in that room, or the tens of millions that voted for this drivel afterwards, ever asked a single question regarding the insanity they had just heard. For example, who exactly performs this surgery? The school nurse? Who pays for it? Taxes? Private funding? Where is it performed? Perhaps it's done in the nurse's office? What are the motivations for it since everything is apparently against everyone's will? The questions go on for eternity, and they all show how stupid these people actually were by electing this monster. The truth is, it's pretty hard to even pass out basic Tylenol to kids for a headache at school. The idea of this evil surgical crew going crazy and swapping genders against everyone's will while getting the proverbial thumbs up from teachers was just pure and absolute insanity. The most insane aspect of it all, though, was that no one in that room really tried to corroborate anything he said. No one had any reaction considering how fucked up that sounded other than some nodding in the general direction of this senile billionaire and the drivel emerging from his mouth. Propaganda, information overload, disinformation are all part of this, sure. The age of the internet, social media, and people's very attention spans are also playing a major role here. Hell, even religion probably plays a big part of this. I wouldn't be surprised if the same parts of the brain that light up when thinking about religion also light up during his speeches for some of these people. Deep down, though, underneath it all, I think the ability to critically think about what people are being told has severely diminished. If we really want to overcome this as a people, we need to remind others that asking questions is so very important.
You know what really pisses me off about Pretty? It's the absolute establishment bootlicking of so many Second Amendment absolutists. I'm a very left-leaning person, but I've always supported gun rights. I've owned many guns. I'm one of the people pumping up the numbers for the rest of the country. And I've always had a more defensive stance on Second Amendment issues than my peers. The number of right-wing gun YouTubers saying shit like, who brings a gun to a protest? Who carries extra magazines? Or, he obviously brandished his gun. It's absolutely sickening. Like, bitch, you do all those things. I always knew they were poser-ass snakes in the grass. But if this situation doesn't open a lot of eyes, I don't know what will. I swear, the worst thing the Democrats did was give up on the Second Amendment culturally. They let the right think we have all the guns. And they pushed well-meaning but misguided people to the right solely on Second Amendment grounds. And to add for the dummies, we watched agents of the state pepper spray, take down, beat, pistol whip, then disarm and execute a law-abiding citizen. Multiple times from many angles. Anyone saying anything else is a lying piece of shit.
Story 7. When Trump was impeached twice during his first term, but nothing ever came of it. Story 8. There is no going back. There never has been, and there never will be any going back. Normal is how we got here. Let's not do normal. Let's do better.
This is not getting as much recognition as it should. Everything that has happened has led to this moment. Normal was not good enough. We could do much better.
Story 9. When Trump got the nomination in 2016. Like, come on, none of this is really new information. He was a sex pest and a racist in the 80s.
For me, it was that first Trump campaign. He kept saying things that would have ended any politician, and it only made him stronger. He attacked not just his opponents, but individual Americans by name. That's when I understood the cumulative damage of right-wing media and social media technology.
I didn't think he'd win. It just seemed so ridiculous. I was living in California, my home for 18 years. My son was born there. The instant Trump got elected, I started making my exit plans. I moved back to Canada just in time for the pandemic. Best decision I ever made. I still teach online at the tutoring center I was working at when I lived there. Looking at standardized tests in the United States and Canada, it's incredibly obvious and very sad how low United States expectations are for literacy. I've got English as a second language students in China who are more advanced than Florida students. And that's not even the lowest ranked state. The leadership in the United States has utterly and intentionally failed their citizens.
His nomination blew up my entire political philosophy. I considered myself a moderate Republican at the time. His success and eventual nomination taught me that the Republican Party was completely incompatible with my worldview. I had to re-examine everything I thought. I can't overstate how much of an impact that had on me.
Story 10. When Trump mocked a disabled reporter in 2015, and that wasn't the end of it right there.
My dad always says the clip is taken out of context. Everything negative is. He recently says there's no proof he was ever on the island.
Story 11. Seeing a Sieg Heil salute at the presidential inauguration, and then the Anti-Defamation League says it's not.
That was honestly the most expected thing to happen if anyone had more than a cursory knowledge about what the Anti-Defamation League actually stands for and who they really represent.
Story 12. It was last year when he fired all the generals and judge advocate general officers and gutted the federal government with no consequences. The military is entirely captured by him, and the next coup he tries, like on January 6th, will be successful because there is no Mike Pence in place to stop him.
Why do you think they don't know? The few conservatives with a conscience have left the legislature. The rest are fine with cronyism.
Honestly, Mike Pence did not get credit or respect for that. He did get death threats from both sides towards him and his family. It was very interesting to watch.
Don't forget that the Republican Party fights against DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion because hiring should be based on ability and qualifications rather than anything else. Then, especially for his second term, he packed his cabinet and other government positions with multi-hundred millionaires, billionaires, donors, and other loyalists into positions of power that they were unqualified for. And the reaction from the cult was, well, I'm not a fan of some of the appointees, but it makes sense that he would surround himself with people who are loyal since the qualified people stabbed him in the back. Like, holy fucking shit. Break it down into a simple sentence. He needs yes men because the experts said he was wrong.
Story 13. When a man who is a convicted felon, a known con man, pathological liar, and one who tried to stage an insurrection and alter an election got voted back in as president, everyone else seems to be playing catch-up to the reality that this country is on the downfall. Look at numerous examples in history, and you would have known already that we're only at the beginning of the end of this great experiment. Story 14. For me, it was January 6th, but not just the riot itself. It was watching how many people immediately downplayed it, justified it, or just moved on like it was no big deal. That felt like a real shift. Once a big chunk of the country can't even agree on what just happened on live TV, it's hard to imagine things snapping back to normal. It also showed how politics stopped being about policy for a lot of people and turned into identity, which is way harder to cool down.
I'm positive a news broadcast said, maybe we should just give the insurrectionists what they want so they stop, which was a very surreal moment for me.
The real clinker was how so very many of my MAGA friends and family came out against what was happening in real time. They were appalled. But within a day, maybe two, they were all on board with it fully and just repeating the Fox News talking points. That is when I knew we as a nation were cooked.
It was a big moment for me, too. Imagine people downplaying 9/11 as no big deal. What made it even worse is that everyone involved got a pardon and walked off scot-free without paying their dues.
Story 15. During the COVID pandemic, that's when I realized that most of our problems have very straightforward solutions, and most people, especially rich people who have all the power, are preventing us from making very simple social progress.
Exactly the same, but more specifically, when he was at the podium spouting complete nonsense about possible cures like light treatment and disinfectants. Seeing the experts there with decades of experience and education give the what the fuck look, then also watching them all stay silent. People not challenging him wasn't anything new, but it's gotten so much worse. Every day it's complete nonsense, and reporters mostly stay silent. We need more Jon Stewarts. He needs to be told what an absolute idiot he is more often.
COVID broke right-wingers fundamentally. When asked to show a tiny bit of compassion, they went ballistic, becoming evil and psychopathic.
What's truly insane is that my grandma was a nurse and has always been pro-vaccine. She was honestly kind of normal about COVID, yet she still fucking votes for Trump.
Story 16. When Sandy Hook showed us the nation was cool with our babies being murdered just so we could have our guns. Not so much going back to normal as lifting a veil. My mother says her generation's loss of innocence was the murder of John Lennon, and it just seems so fucking trite. I still can't talk about Sandy Hook without crying. Story 17. When the mentally challenged slumlord from my state, whom the entire respectable society in this state acknowledged was a joke of a loser, somehow managed to rally a cult of losers and take over the country. Story 18. If you want an answer from an Englishman, when he was cheered for mocking the disabled reporter, that was the very moment I knew you in the United States were fucked up for a long time.
Not in 2012, when the audience at a primary debate cheered the idea of letting people die if they showed up to an emergency room and didn't have the means to pay for care.
Story 19. America's issue with gun violence in schools will never get better. It's an issue that pops up, then is forgotten about, creating an endless cycle where a new shooting happens and the victims are forgotten about. So here's a list of victims who died in school shootings since Columbine. Rachel Scott, aged 17. Daniel Rohrbaugh, aged 15. And Marie Hockelter, aged 17. William David Sanders, aged 47. Kyle Velasquez, aged 16. Stephen Kernow, aged 14. Cassie Bernal, aged 17. Isaiah Shoels, aged 18. Matthew Kechter, aged 16. Lauren Townsend, aged 18. John Tomlin, aged 16. Kelly Fleming, aged 16. Daniel Mauser, aged 15. Corey DePuter, aged 17. Alyssa Miriam Alhadef, 14. Marcin Duquenguiano, 14. Nicholas Paul Dworet, 17. Aaron Lewis Faze, 37. Christopher Brent Hickson, 49. Luke Thomas Hoyer, 15. Gina Rose Montalto, 14. Elena Joan Petty, 14. Helena Frazier Ramsey, 17. Alexander Logan Schachter, 14. Carmen Marie Skentrup, 16. Scott J. Beigel, 35. Jamie Taylor Gutenberg, 14. Cara Marie Logran, 14. Joaquin Oliver, 17. Meadow Jade Pollock, 18. Peter Wong, 15. Sidney Aiello, 17. Calvin Desser, 16. Mason Schermerhorn, 14. Christian Angulo, 14. Christina Irami, 53. Richard Aspinwall, 39. Patricia Navarro-Valles, 39. Cha Jan, also known as Jerry Chong, 64. Naoko Takamaru, 69. Evelyn Diekhaus, 9. William Kinney, 9. Hallie Scruggs, 9. Cynthia Peake, 61. Mike Hill, 61. Catherine Kuntz, 60. Nevaeh Alyssa Bravo, 10. Jacqueline Jalen Cazares, 9. McKenna Lee Elrod, 10. Jose Manuel Flores Jr., 10. Elena Amaya Garcia, 9. Usilla Sergio Garcia, 10. Ameriello Garza, 10. Xavier James Lopez, 10. Jace Carmelo Luvanos, 10. Tess Marimata, 10. Miranda Gale Mathis, 11. Alithia Haven Ramirez, 10. Annabel Guadalupe Rodriguez, 10. Maite Yulana Rodriguez, 10. Alexandria Anaya Rubio, 10. Layla Marie Salazar, 11. Jayla Nicole Silguero, 10. Eliana Cruz Torres, 10. Rogelio Fernandez Torres, 10. Irma Linda Garcia, 48. Eva Mireles, 44. Madison Baldwin, 17. Tate Meyer, 16. Hannah St. Juliana, 14. Justin Schilling, 17. Cynthia Tisdale, 63. Glenda and Perkins, 64. Jared Connard Black, 17. Shauna Fisher, 16. Christian Riley Garcia, 15. Aaron Kyle McLeod, 15. Angelique Ramirez, 15. Sabika Sheik, 17. Christopher Stone, 17. Kimberly Vaughn, 14. Lucero Alcaraz, 19. Trevin Taylor Ansbach, 20. Rebecca and Carnes, 18. Quinn Glenn Cooper, 18.
Kim Saltmarsh Dietz, 59.
Lucas Eibel, 18. Jason Dale Johnson, 33. Lawrence Levine, 67. Serena Dawn Moore, 43. Zoe Galasso, 14.
Ya Soriano, 14.
Shaylee Chucklenaskett, 14. Andrew Freiberg, 15.
Rachel Davino, 29.
Dawn Hawksprung, 47. And Marie Murphy, 52. Lauren Rousseau, 30. Teacher. Mary Sherlack, 56.
Victoria Lake Soto, 27.
Charlotte Bacon, 6. Daniel Barden, 7. Olivia Engel, 6. Josephine Gay, 7. Dylan Hockley, 6. Madeline Sue, 6. Catherine Hubbard, 6. Chase Kowalski, 7. Jesse Lewis, 6.
Ana Murvuezerene, 6.
James Mattioli, 6. Grace McDonnell, 7. Emily Parker, 6. Jack Pinto, 6. Noah Posner, 6. Caroline Previdai, 6. Jessica Ricos, 6. Avielle Richmond, 6. Benjamin Wheeler, 6. Allison Wyatt, 6. Charing Rinzing Bhutia, 38. Doris Chibuko, 40. Sonam Chodon, 33.
Grace Yunhakim, 23.
Kathleen Ping, 24. Judith Seymour, 53. Lija Singh, 21. Catalina Garcia, 20. Juliana Gehent, 32. Ryan Mace, 19. Daniel Parmenter, 20. Gail Dabowski, 20. Emily Hilscher, 19. Ryan Clark, 22. Ross A. Alamedin. Christopher James Bishop. Brian R. Bloom. Austin Michelle Cloyd. Jocelyn Couture Nowak. Kevin P. Granada. Matthew Gregory Gwaltney. Caitlin Miller Hammerin. Jeremy Michael Herbstritt. Rachel Elizabeth Hill. Jarrett Lee Lane.
Matthew Joseph Laporte. Henri J.
Lee, also known as Henlai. Liviu Librescu.
Tifau Luganatan.
Pertahi Memora Halomone Lumbantoruin. Lauren Ashley McCain. Daniel Patrick O'Neill.
Juan Ramón Ortiz Ortiz.
Minal Hiralal Panchal. Daniel Alejandro Perez Cueva. Erin Nicole Peterson. Michael Stephen Pohol Jr. Julia Kathleen Pride. Mary Karen Red. Rima Joseph Sameha. Walid Mohammed Shaalan. Leslie Geraldine Sherman. Maxine Shelley Turner. Nicole Regina White. Derek Brunn, 28. Neva Rogers, 62. Alicia White, 14. Thurleen Stillday, 15. Chanel Rosebear, 15. Chase Lucier, 15. Dwayne Lewis, 15. Paul Hersberg, 30. Bruce Jacobson, 32. Donald Carges, 41. Deborah Paulson, 25. Seth Fessenden, 72. Frank Teplansky, 51. Stephen Beck, 32. Rathanar or 9. Tui Tran, 6. Sakim N, 6. On Lim, 8. Ram Chun, 6. Nicole Hadley, 14. Jessica James, 17. Kay Stager, 15. Lydia K. Dew, 17. Christina Michelle Menifee, 16. Mary and Woodham, 50. Shannon Wright, 32. Stephanie Johnson, 12. Natalie Brooks, 11. Paige and Herring, 12. Brithany Varner, 11. And the list goes on and on. Story 20. When Republicans stole that Supreme Court seat without any consequences, I knew things might get ugly. Then, in 2016, when the Democratic National Committee deemed it smart to push Clinton and the "nah, you're doing just fine, the economy is great, look at the stock market" message against a dangerous right-wing extremist fake populist, so high on their own supply that they didn't understand the catastrophic consequences this might have, I expected things to get ugly. When the demagogue actually won, I knew things would get ugly. When Republicans largely refused to convict after the impeachment, with many of them gaslighting and pretending it was up to the courts to decide since he had already lost the election, and the stolen Supreme Court then made the opposite argument, that it would have been up to the Senate to decide, I knew the United States would go down in flames. After he botched the pandemic response, lost to Biden, and did January 6th, I thought the United States would have learned the lesson that you do not give those people any power. For a short period, I was hopeful that the United States had dodged the bullet, because the fascists put all of their eggs into one basket, and that basket was a total moron. In hindsight, it should have been foreshadowed by how close this election was. It should have been a landslide, a Republican wipeout, but it wasn't. Everything since has been entirely unsurprising, though I did not expect how rotten to the core the Republican Party, the far right, and the Epstein class actually are, and how complicit some people astroturfing as centrists are, until I saw it with my own eyes in the Epstein files.
The appropriate response would have been to go to the public and say, if Republicans refuse to follow the Constitution, as soon as we got 50 senators, we're going to get rid of the filibuster for Supreme Court appointments, pack the court with a bunch of communists, and then spend our time expropriating Republican donors to the benefit of the public, and then ban money in politics. Rubber stamped and behind closed doors. Tell their own senators that if even one of them goes against the party line on this, they will get dragged into the mud and their lives will get destroyed. But that would obviously never happen. Even the idea seems absurd, and Republicans understand that. They bank on it. They understand that the corporate wing of the Democratic National Committee is aligned with them on many things, including the protection of the Epstein class. And even the true institutionalists like Biden would never do such a thing because it would be unprecedented and uncivil. McConnell instantly removed the filibuster on Supreme Court nominations in 2017 to add another corrupt clown to the court. They did not give a fuck. So here we are. The Republicans don't give a fuck about precedent, civility, the Constitution, crime, or hypocrisy. They will do whatever they think they can get away with without punishment to further enrich themselves and the broader Epstein class.
I mean, the Democratic whip, Schumer's second-in-command, was one of the traitors who broke the government shutdown for absolutely nothing in return, while winning the fight for public opinion, after Schumer spent his time behind closed doors finding enough people with elections in the distant future willing to flip. This is the guy who's supposed to whip them into following the party line. And that's exactly what Dick Durbin did, because caving after doing a bit of theater was Schumer's plan all along. Then he pretended to be very angry with them. This guy thinks people are absolute dipshits. If he gets away with it, he's correct about that. As long as people like this slimy little worm have any say in the Democratic National Committee, they will only accelerate the decline into fascism. It's all just a sick game of politics to him. Don't be surprised when he's in the missing 50% of the Epstein files, if they ever get released. Imagine President Lyndon B. Johnson's Democratic Party bailing on the Civil Rights Act because of the Senate parliamentarian, or whatever the fuck. Oh, they played the same game for decades prior to that. Remember what Martin Luther King said about the white liberals?
Your points about the Supreme Court and keeping the caucus in line are exactly what I've been banging on about for years. Bullying works in politics. It's how we got some of the biggest legislative achievements in American history. Imagine Lyndon B. Johnson's Democratic Party bailing on the Civil Rights Act because of the Senate parliamentarian or whatever the heck.
Story 21. The fact that Trump wasn't immediately impeached and removed from office when his link to Epstein was definitely confirmed. It confirms that institutions in America are fundamentally non-functional, and we're effectively a dictatorship because the rule of law does not apply in any capacity to the people in power. The Constitution might as well be toilet paper at this point, the way the establishment shits on it.
I am astounded at the corruption, its breadth and extent. There is a moral rot in America that is so prevalent, so far-reaching. It truly is incredible and terrifying.
There are so many legitimate reasons outside of the Epstein files that he could and should be impeached this time around. It's insane. The outright bribery and corruption from his cryptocurrency schemes was immediate as he took office again, and it's a listed reason for impeachment in the Constitution.
Story 22. When the Supreme Court handed an election to George W. Bush that he didn't actually win.
And then, 3 of Bush's lawyers wound up on the Supreme Court of the United States. Slight chuckle.
Yep, this was the beginning of the grand old party's realization that winning through the courts was more ironclad than winning minds.
Story 23. People defending pedophiles. Defending Nazis was bad. but most modern Nazis are performative. The group of white guys in the back of the U-Haul are just chanting and marching around, not killing Jewish people. These pedophiles, though, they're actually fucking kids. Trump fucks kids. People cheer for him.
You understand that the Nazis didn't start out by murdering Jewish people on an industrial scale, right? Like, there was a ton of bad shit leading up to that. And it kind of feels like you should read up on it if you think modern Nazis are performative, whatever that means. But anyway, your ultimate point stands. Trump is a rapist, pedophile, piece of shit, and people still rush to lick his boots and clean his diaper.
Story 24. When a sitting president became an insurrectionist and the Senate acquitted him. Story 25. The schism between left and right has been growing ever since Newt Gingrich in the 1990s. I can understand our politicians being this tribal as a strategy, but it's been permeating among the voter base. Now people don't vote with their interest in mind. They vote to spite the others. Own the libs in modern parlance. You could have Hitler with Stalin as a running mate on the ballot, and they'll vote them in as long as it pisses off the other guys. Story 26, George W. Bush's election and then 9/11, the Patriot Act, the plan to invade 7 Middle Eastern countries, and so on. Things have been on this trajectory for a long time. The U.S. decline began in 2000. No new stock market highs. I'm talking indices like the S&P 500, NASDAQ 100, and so forth versus gold in 26 years.
If you grew up thinking superstitiously that the world would end in 2000 like I did, party like it's 1999 and all that, well, I think we all expected it to be some instantaneous event like an asteroid or something. But no, it was the beginning of a slow, painful death. I think history will look back at it that way, though. It was a significant shift, and 2000 marks it perfectly. And I'm not just talking about U.S. dominance and the fall of empires. It is still playing out and may actually lead to some large event, or just the slow death as we fight over resources like water or something.
You're spot on. And yes, it is quite certain based on our current trajectory that terrible resource wars will be fought across this planet before the end of the century. As a 38-year-old, I'm quite certain I'll be dead before then. But as for my children and their children, anything less than a miracle, and I truly fear they will live to see times that will make the world wars of the 20th century seem tame. I pray to every god that exists that I'm wrong. But with climate change on track to see hundreds of millions in forced migration within the next 50 years, the writing is on the wall.
Story 27. Thoughtful, when did Democrats begin to always stand for the status quo, no matter what the previous Republican had turned the status quo into? Reagan changed the status quo. Clinton defended Reagan's status quo. Bush II changed the status quo. Obama and Biden defended Bush's status quo. Trump changed the status quo. Ergo, the next Democrats will defend the new status quo.
Man, when you put it that way, it is so fucking dark. It speaks to my existential question of how to stomach voting Democrat ever again.
Story 28. For me, it was when political disagreements stopped being about policy and started feeling like people were living in completely different realities. Once basic facts became debatable, it felt like we crossed into something that doesn't just go back to normal. Story 29. I attended a presentation that covered this topic, touching on the relationship between structure and flexibility. From what I gathered, the progressive approach to feedback mechanisms was key. Story 30. Not recent, but 9/11. I distinctly remember being called crazy and laughed at when I said the Department of Homeland Security sounded ominous, the Patriot Act was a slippery slope, and it wouldn't be long before all these new laws and directives to go after terrorists would be used against us one day. I was only about 13 years old at the time. Story 31. The biggest moment for me was in 2020 during the Black Lives Matter protests. On June 1st, Trump had the National Guard fire rubber bullets at protesters outside the White House so that he could step outside for a photo op, holding a Bible in front of a church. While Trump's actions were horrendous, it was the reaction I saw from my conservative friends that appalled me the most. Not only were they okay with this atrocity, but they celebrated it. Many of them supported using real bullets and killing the protesters. These were people I had known for years, many of them more than a decade. We had different political beliefs and sometimes we might argue, but it never came between us. We could still get along and trust each other despite our differences. Not anymore. They acknowledged that they were fine with the government killing people for disagreeing with it. The law didn't matter. Rules or decorum didn't matter. If you had different beliefs, you deserved to die. And they would revel in it. Many of these friends changed when Trump was first elected. They became much more outspoken about their racism and bigotry. I assumed they were simply enthusiastic about their win and would get over it when reality set in. However, this incident made me realize that would never happen. They fully supported what the regime was doing. They wanted an authoritarian government. They wanted to punish people for being different. They wanted a country where freedom only applied to people like them. I was not one of them. They didn't want me to be safe. If I had been one of those protesters, they would have been fine if I had been killed. Some of them may have even wanted to pull the trigger. They were not my friends. Things would never be the same because the people that I used to love and trust did not care about me. They wanted me to change or die. With that realization, even if Republicans did completely lose power, things could never go back to the way they were. Story 32. When they bought the Supreme Court, they've gained enough power to ensure democracy gets choked to death. The Democrats are either willfully taking part because of their corporate donors, or too stupid to stop it. Story 33. August 13, 1981. The signing of the Economic Recovery Tax Act. When Reagan cut taxes, I wondered how we were going to pay for everything. Debt and underfunding everything but the military was the answer. The lack of education dollars created a public that is less empathetic. People who don't care for their fellow Homo sapiens vote Republican. Story 34. When a convicted felon and child rapist was reelected after such a horrible first term. Story 35. During the 2020 pandemic, when the whole world thought it was safe to wear a mask to protect each other, but Trump convinced people that masks were infringing on our bodily rights. Then masks became a political left versus right issue, instead of a means of protecting others from our germs and preventing the spread of COVID-19.
When you politicize everything, even science, you create a society of uninformed extremists. It's not about facts, it's about opinions and beliefs. We've been wearing masks in surgery for over 100 years to prevent the spread of disease to vulnerable people. Trump comes along, and because he's a whiny baby, he discredits a very effective and proven method of disease prevention.
Forever mad that guy didn't just slap his branding on some $29.99 red masks and tell all his voters they absolutely needed to wear one to protect America or whatever.
I saw the other side of the mask situation, being forced to wear a mask outside in 90-degree heat with no other workers within 50 feet, and finding out that hourly equaled essential, while salary equaled work from home.
Story 36. When the Mueller report came out and established that Russia definitely interfered in the 2016 election in multiple ways, hacking, social media operations, leaks, the Trump campaign welcomed it and benefited from it. 34 people, including his campaign staff, were indicted and convicted, and nothing happened to Trump. He kept running the country and campaigning. Story 37, 2001 to 2002, when the Patriot and Homeland Security Acts were passed with virtually no dissent. Story 38, when Republicans took the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives in the November 2024 elections, while already holding a majority on the Supreme Court. Story 39, watching the footage of people storming the Capitol on January 6, 2021, while Congress was certifying the election. I remember just standing there in the kitchen with my sister, watching some news footage of aerial shots of so-called protesters. Red, traitors breaking into the fucking Capitol building in a huge wave of bodies. It was hard to believe. Story 40. When Doge forced itself into buildings, federal employees just said, fuck the standard operating procedures and let them steal everything. Felt like no one put up a fight and just followed orders. Story 41. When parents started letting or encouraging their kids to wear fuck Joe Biden gear to middle school, it marked the moment I realized that our kids, and all Americans from now on, will never see or understand civility and dignity as a required part of civil discourse or duty. Story 42. Every moment that there's no accountability or even talk of accountability for the most heinous acts, every moment is a reminder It's exhausting. Story 43. It's 2016. I was watching the second presidential debate on a network with approval trackers. They had given a representative audience sample dials they could turn to approve or disapprove, and displayed a graph on the bottom of the screen. The Fox News moderator asks Trump if he would accept the result of the election if he lost. Tossing a softball, he expected to be answered with a canned of course, because I respect democracy, but I'm not going to lose. Trump just says no. His approval with Republicans goes up. Horrified at the fumble, the moderator gives him a chance to clarify. Trump just says no. His approval with Republicans goes up. The moderator, still thinking he lived in a world where Trump was losing votes with these answers, desperately tries to get Trump to say he respects the result of elections. Trump just says no. His approval with Republicans goes up. This is the exact moment I lost all hope. Not because of anything Trump did, but because of what the electorate just told me about themselves. As long as everyone believes in the process, it wouldn't have mattered if Trump won, because if he upset too many voters, he would be removed, and this knowledge would constrain his behavior. Much of his first administration still believed they lived in that world until 2020. It was what applied the restraint there was. They're all gone or co-opted now. I learned the world I had lived in was dead as a little line went up on my TV screen. I don't know when the world irreversibly changed, but it was before that moment. Story 44. There have been so many instances, but frankly, losing 2016 was the first. I grieved hard that night because it was already clear that truth had lost all meaning. I didn't realize at the time how much anti-intellectualism had been percolating under the hood. But once I understood how much it had grown, it was already too late. More importantly, the fact that truth already had no meaning is damning enough that we shouldn't go back to normal. If we survive this, we need a new normal where a third of the population isn't vilifying knowledge. Without that, we're still just a powder keg. Story 45. When the Supreme Court stopped the recount that would have let Gore be president, I was in Georgia for training, surrounded by fools cheering the end of independent branches. The hanging Chad fiasco decided by another Bush. It was clear then. The Supreme Court was cooked, and money was the only voter. I moved a few years later. I thought the global financial crisis would help correct it, but no, coiled the spring even more, and put their nasty tentacles around the globe, while even more cheered freedom to exploit. But not equal rights for all. My thesis at university was on campaign finance reform. The opposite happened years later. Citizens United. Story 46. When Donald Trump became president the first time. By round 3, I'm just tired, scared, and sad that this country has gone down so far in 12 months. Story 47. So, this is normal. It's just not in the shadows anymore. Like a direct statement rather than a dog whistle. But to play along. When it started looking, sounding, and feeling like sitting at my childhood dinner table, I cut them all off officially in 2022. I had 0 years of fresh air. To go from your house and family to everywhere is truly a trip. I mean, Trump was racist backlash to Obama. In America, and I say that with my full chest. It just was. This country has never dealt with the obvious, and the wounds are still festering. Ignoring that doesn't make them go away. Complacency is what killed my hope for this country. But when everywhere I looked, online, the newspaper, the people standing in line at the store, everywhere, looked like my childhood, I knew they won a battle. And I knew it was going to take some time to get anything back from that. Because of the complacency, though, not because of MAGA. Everyone sitting on their asses, getting giddy over every Trump regret, acting like people who voted for Trump a third time after January 6th will finally vote differently. Hits different when you're in a marginalized community that's being directly harmed by this administration's bigotry. I mean, 2024 was a direct, planned, and executed response to 2020. Every move was on NPR every day. But no one cared because white people still had the privilege of mail-in voting, so why care or do anything about black people being gerrymandered out of having a voice in Nashville? And stuff like this happened everywhere. And we all suffer because of it. And they're perfecting it for the midterms. Just gotta wait until the white people fear for their lives before we see any meaningful changes. Which, actually, Maybe that'll be sooner rather than later now. We'll have to wait and see how distracted they can make Americans. Story 48. When they named the first state after the Queen's chastity and started selling slaves from it. Story 49. Less than 3 months after January 6th, when all of the Republican politicians fell in line to whitewash an attempted coup. It was clear then that they lacked the political and moral will to defend democracy, and were so invested in their own power and wealth gains that they'd be willing to burn the country down and ride Trump's coattails into authoritarianism. Emphatic, the nail in the coffin was Trump winning in 2024. Story 50. Citizens United. Once elections became commodities, our democratic republic became terminally ill. Story 51. In 2020, people watched the Trump administration kidnap children and put kids as young as infants in tender-age shelters throughout his first term and decided they wanted more of that. People really wanted more infant camps. The American voter is lost. We deserve what we get. Story 52. Around 2012, when the racist Zimmerman shit started happening around the country. It didn't make sense. Growing up in the 80s and then things getting more chill towards the 2000s, only to go way backwards in progress. That cancer has now spread everywhere and into everything. Everything is a tribe now. Fucking dumb. Just be fucking humans and chill the fuck out. Story 53. I'm not a US citizen, but the moment I realized that this isn't normal, this is cult-like behavior and being right or winning has become more important than facts, was when Elon did the Nazi salute. It's been very clear on a global level what that gesture means. Nobody has ever questioned what it means or argued about it. It's a crime in several countries to even do it. Yet Elon did it and all of a sudden people are excusing it, claiming that it's some Roman salute that nobody ever claimed it to be before or barely even heard of. Since then, there have been so many times these idiots have been doubling down and straight up lying about what's actually happening before our eyes in the name of being right. The ICE pig who shot that woman was acting in self-defense as she clearly used the car as a weapon and he feared for his life. To paraphrase the president, the other guy who got executed on the street shouldn't have been violently resisting arrest, etc. There are so many examples of this over the past year that it's absolutely horrifying. Now I heard J.D. Vance doubling down when asked about Trump's pedo trips. Great. It's sick. It's absolutely sick. And that country is absolutely poisoned. Story 54. When Trump got elected in 2016. Yeah, it's not recent, but that sealed it for me. Story 55. When we got the Department of Homeland Security and the Patriot Act, I was still pretty young, only 19, and wasn't paying super close attention to politics, but they creeped me out as being kind of fascist. Though, to be fair, having to sing God Bless the USA, proud to be an American, during the first Gulf War as a third grader kind of tipped me off. Story 56. When the government did nothing after January 6th. Even more so when all the domestic terrorists were pardoned. Story 57. When Trump faced no consequences for January 6th, even with a Democratic administration in the White House. Story 58. I knew things would never be normal again on September 11th, 2001. That's when things took a dramatic shift and laid the groundwork for where we are today. Story 59. Republican support for Trump never really dips. They will change positions in real time to align with his whims and think nothing of it. Democrats have their issues, but the GOP increasingly feels like a cult with no interest in governing. Until they regain some sense of normalcy, it means there is only one viable party for sane people, and every election comes with the risk of major catastrophe. Think about how much damage Trump has caused in 1 year alone. I'm not sure how we maintain our position in the world if every few years this repeats. Story 60. September 11th and the passage of the Patriot Act. I saw this coming and was told how crazy I was, that I was a conspiracy theorist. Story 61. 9/11. That's when I knew nothing in the past, present, or future was actually normal to begin with. Instead, we are controlled by a set group of people, which is true. And now the Epstein files are showing just how true it is, among other things, if you did your research before they came out. Story 62. It was January 6th, 2020. For me, I simply cannot forget the feeling of checking Reddit while working, since I was, and still am, privileged enough to work from home, and the cold shock I felt when I saw that Congress was under fucking siege. I don't think any actual work got done that day. Instead, I was watching live streams, following the news and so on. Because that was some pretty serious shit. They wanted to kill Mike Pence, or at least they insinuated they did with the noose if he didn't refuse to certify the election results. That we had not seen here in the United States for a long time. I knew even then that there was simply no fucking way a movement full of people willing to go that far would simply go back into the shadows. One does not openly court insurrection and then, shrug your shoulders and go home when it doesn't work. You go home, sure, but you're plotting how to do better next time or how to achieve your goals in a different way. Story 63, January 6th. When I was freaking the fuck out and damn near everyone in my life acted unfazed by it, I thought, oh, we're gone. Story 64. Life was chill all the way until COVID, and now everything feels so much more fast-paced and expensive. Story 65. The abolition of the Federal Communications Commission's Fairness Doctrine in 1987. This doctrine required broadcasters to fairly present differing viewpoints on controversial issues of public importance. Its abolition gave rise to Fox News and similar outlets. Story 66. The Brooks Brothers riots. That was the prototype of everything we're seeing here. They stopped the 2000 recount and handed the election to Bush when Gore rightfully won after a forensic recount was completed. Bush won, then we catapulted into wars in the Middle East, ruined the world economy with fractional reserve banking, put us on a climate death spiral, over-militarized the state of Israel, and cratered American education standards. Story 67, January 6th. Years of debating with friends and family. They live in a different reality that will ignore anything that challenges their views. Story 68. When Donald Trump was elected president over Hillary Clinton, the second that projection was made, I knew nothing would ever be the same. Story 69. The moment the United States elected someone who started his entire campaign based on fake news, I knew what he was trying to do. I thought America was too smart for it. We got another chance in 2024, and they put him back. And here we are. Story 70. After Trump's 2017 inauguration, when a white guy with an open-carry assault rifle told a person of color to get to the back of the line in the coffee shop. Story 71. When they started shooting peaceful, protesting citizens and immediately justifying the actions with a false narrative. The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. Story 72. When Heather Heyer died and that fool said, "Good people on both sides," the day after the Tiki Torch March, that was the moment I knew this was not normal politics. It was also the moment I knew I could no longer stand by and support anyone who would support that bullshit. I've had zero trouble saying goodbye to closet racists and assholes. I'm also black and Canadian with American family members in Baltimore. Story 73. Pretty much just Trump getting elected again when there were clear signs of election tampering. Story 74. When Trump ran again and people actually thought it was a good idea. He tried to steal the election the first time he lost. Why on earth did everyone not see this coming? Story 75. I sent a letter to Senator John Cornyn pleading to impeach President Trump for threatening our allies and threatening to take over Greenland. I got an infuriating letter back about how important Greenland is to the United States, completely disregarding the fact we already have military bases on it and it is owned by our allies. Everyone who supported this nonsense needs to go. Thank you for contacting me regarding United States policy towards Greenland. I appreciate having the benefit of your comments on this matter. Greenland has enormous strategic importance to the United States due to its location and its large critical mineral deposits. I support President Trump's efforts to enhance Arctic security and applaud his work to secure a framework for an agreement that will accomplish that goal. Greenland occupies a key geographic position for both the United States and our adversaries. It is an important location for the United States' early warning radars and air defense capabilities, and Greenland is home to the Patuxent Space Base, the Department of Defense's northernmost base, which serves as a first line of defense against attacks over the Arctic. The Department of Defense has reported that military collaboration in the Arctic between the People's Republic of China and Russia has increased, including joint exercises, Greenland also possesses some of the largest critical mineral deposits in the world and could help the United States lessen its dependency on critical minerals produced or processed in China, which are a significant national security liability. It is critical that the United States take the lead in critical minerals mining in Greenland and prevent our adversaries from gaining a foothold. I support President Trump's efforts to bolster United States national security in Greenland and throughout the Arctic. As a result of his efforts, President Trump recently announced that he had formed a framework for a future deal on Greenland, which will provide the United States with significant military access to the island and could involve the deployment of parts of the Golden Dome missile defense system to better protect Americans from our adversaries. I stand ready to work with the President to enhance our national security in Greenland and the Arctic. As your representative in the United States Senate, I appreciate the opportunity to hear your concerns about United States policy towards Arctic security. I will keep your thoughts in mind as these matters are considered in the 119th Congress. Thank you for taking the time to contact me. Sincerely, John Cornyn, United States Senator, 517 Hart Senate Office Building, Washington, D.C. 20510, telephone, area code 202-224-2934, fax, area code 202-228-2856. Story 76. When Bernie Sanders didn't get the nomination in 2016, we could have had it all. But the Democratic National Committee is too deep in corporate pockets, and Republicans are worse. Story 77. January 7th, when the Republicans acted like the insurrectionists were just tourists going to the Capitol.
On the evening of January 6th, lots of Republicans swore off Trump. Lindsey Graham, Nikki Haley, Mitch McConnell, and others. But they changed their tune, didn't they? Fucking cowards, all of them.
Story 78. When Donald Duck, a convicted felon 34 times to be exact, became President of the United States of America a second time. Story 79. When masked men started grabbing brown people off the street and throwing them into camps. Story 80. The racism that I saw after 9/11, our subsequent global response, and the Patriot Act. Story 81. Honestly, it was back in 2015 or 2016 when he publicly made fun of the disabled reporter on stage without a shred of shame, coupled with his later comments about Mexicans being animals. I still can't contain my disgust at how offensive and rude these incidents were, and how much of a shock it felt to see that level of immaturity and unprofessionalism from someone who was supposed to represent a powerful nation on the world stage. I never saw Americans or their politics the same after that, and felt it was the beginning of the end.